You know exactly what it is like to sit at a table surrounded by family and feel completely alone. You know what it is to be in an environment full of people who should be your home, and feel that the air is heavy, that conversations have calculated detours, that glances pass through you as if you were transparent. You know what it is to smile so as not to spoil the moment while inside something is dying in silence. And you know with painful precision what it is to carry this home, close the bedroom door and ask God in a low voice, "What is wrong with me?" This is what we need to talk about today, not in a softened way, not wrapped in beautiful phrases that avoid the real. We need to talk about the rejection that came from within, from family, from those closest to you, from the people who should have been your first line of protection, and who, for some reason you still cannot fully understand, were the first to cast stones. And more than talking about the pain, I will reveal in this video the spiritual mechanism that transforms this rejection, specifically this one, the most intimate and the most devastating, into the source of the greatest authority you will carry for the rest of your life. Do not skip any section. What comes in the next parts changes everything. If this content reaches deep where others do not, subscribe to the channel now and activate the bell. Every week there is something that goes straight to what matters. Let us name what you have lived, because naming the pain is the first act of real healing. There is a form of rejection that is easy to identify. Explicit distancing, the harsh words said to your face, the clear and declared cut. You know when that happens. It hurts, but you know where it came from. But there is another form, more sophisticated, harder to name without sounding like you are exaggerating. It is the rejection that hides within normalcy, the holiday where everyone was given a gift except you, and when you noticed, someone said, "Oh, it was unintentional." The important family decision that was made without consulting you, as if your opinion were not part of the whole. The achievement you shared that was met with a quick silence before the subject changed. The moment you needed it most and the call was not answered, not once but consistently, whenever the weight was yours. This is what researchers at the USP Institute of Psychology call chronic relational rejection. Unlike open conflict, it operates at the level of subtext, of gestures that do not happen, of words that do not come, of absences that accumulate in silence until their weight becomes impossible to ignore. And what makes this form of rejection particularly destructive is that it attacks something very specific, the narrative you have about who you are. Because when rejection comes from within the family, from the people who were present when you did not yet have a formed identity, when you were still learning what it means to exist, it does not arrive merely as a painful experience. It arrives as information, as data about your value, as an implicit answer to the question that no child asks in words, but that every human being asks with their body: am I enough? And when the answer that arrives, repeated over years, is a form of no, you internalize it. You learn without anyone needing to say it explicitly that your place at the table is smaller, that you need to make yourself smaller to be tolerated, that your joy, your intensity, your calling, your difference are things that need to be moderated so that the environment functions. A study published by the Federal Council of Psychology of Brazil identified that rejection of family origin is the factor of greatest weight in the formation of limiting beliefs in adults over 35 years old, above any other relational experience, including failed romantic relationships. This is because the family is the first context in which we learn what we are. And when this context teaches that we are less, the learning goes deep, deeper than any rational argument can reach alone. But here is what I need you to hear with all the attention you have now. This learning was wrong, and there is a word I will reveal in the next few minutes that will permanently change the way you view not only what they did to you, but what God was doing with you during all this time. The word is kavod, K-A-V-O-D. In Hebrew, kavod is translated as glory, honor, or weight. But the original concept is much more concrete than any translation can convey. In the ancient world, kavod literally described the weight of a person, not physical weight, but the weight of presence, of influence, of substance. A person with kavod was a person whose existence had mass, that when they entered an environment, the environment felt it, that when they spoke there was weight in the words, that when they acted there was consequence in the action. And what I need you to understand about kavod is this: it is not conferred by others, it is revealed upon you. You do not receive kavod from a family that approves of you. You discover the kavod that was always in your structure, and the process of discovery, with surprising frequency in the Bible and in human history, passes through rejection. Because rejection has a paradoxical effect that only the perspective of time allows one to see. It forces the person who rejects to take a position, and by taking a position, they reveal what was hidden. The lamp under the bushel, when taken from under it, does not create light. It reveals the light that was always there. The stone the builders rejected did not gain value at the moment of rejection. The value was already in the structure of the stone. Rejection merely revealed who did not have enough discernment to recognize it. And here the Bible gives us a story that you probably know, but that I want to tell you from an angle that is rarely addressed. In the first book of Samuel, chapter 16, the prophet Samuel receives a specific instruction from God. Go to the house of Jesse in Bethlehem, because I have chosen one of his sons to be king of Israel. God did not tell Samuel to look. He told him to go to a specific address. He already knew where what he was looking for was located. Samuel arrives. Jesse gathers his sons. And the text reveals something that is devastating in its simplicity. Jesse presented 7 sons to the prophet. 7. One by one, each passed before Samuel, and before each one God said, "It is not this one." But there was an 8th son. David was in the field, tending the sheep. He was not called. He was not considered part of the group that deserved to be presented to the prophet. His own father did not include him in the list of candidates. It was not a logistical oversight. The house was small, the sons were known. David was deliberately left out of the room where destiny was being determined. Think about the weight of that for a moment. Not an external enemy leaving you out, your own father. At the most important moment the family had experienced, the visit of a prophet of God, the son God had chosen was outside, invisible to human evaluation, considered insufficient to deserve a seat in the room. Samuel asks, "Are these all the sons?" And Jesse answers with a phrase that spans centuries, "There still remains the youngest, who is tending the sheep." The youngest. In Hebrew, the text uses the word katan, which carries the double meaning of youngest in age and least in attributed value. David, in the eyes of his own father, was the katan, the one of less, the one who did not need to be in the room. And then Samuel says, "Send for him." And the text says that when David entered, God said to Samuel, "Arise and anoint him, for this is he." This is he. Not this one will do, not this one will work. This is he. David's identity and destiny were not created by his father's recognition. They were revealed in God long before any human being had the capacity to see. The room Jesse had chosen to reveal the king was wrong from the beginning, because the king was in the field with the sheep, invisible to human eyes and completely visible to the eyes of God. Let this image sink in. While David was tending the sheep without knowing the prophet was in the room, God was already managing the details of his destiny, without the father's participation, without the brother's recognition, without any of the validations that the human world considers necessary for a destiny to be fulfilled. David's kavod did not depend on Jesse's evaluation, and your kavod does not depend on the evaluation of those who left you outside the room. But there is a second dimension to this story that most people have never heard discussed, and it is the heart of what I want you to carry from this video. After being anointed, after having received the prophetic confirmation that he was the chosen one, David went back to the sheep. He went back to the field. He continued in the same place, in the same function, with the same brothers who had not included him. The text does not say there was an immediate change of circumstance. It says that the Spirit of God came upon David from that day forward. From that day forward. David did not wait for his brothers to recognize him. He did not wait for his father to apologize. He did not wait for external circumstances to realign, to validate what had happened in the Spirit. He returned to the function he was exercising, and he exercised it with the Spirit he had received. The field that was previously just a job became the laboratory of the authority he would one day exercise over a nation. Every lion and every bear that David faced in the field, without a witness, without an audience, without recognition, was a battle that calibrated the warrior who would one day face Goliath. The skill with the harp that he developed in the silence of the field was what opened the palace doors, not the approval of his brothers. The character that invisibility built in him was what sustained the king's authority when the palace crises tried to destroy him. David's field was the spiritual equivalent of Moses' desert, the environment of formation that human eyes read as irrelevance and that God was using as a construction chamber for what could not be built in any other way. And here is the question that will change the way you view your story. What is God building in you in the field of your life, in the place where you are, which others do not yet recognize as important, that He would need to build exactly at this level of invisibility so that it is strong enough to sustain what is coming? Like this video now. This simple gesture helps this message reach more people who are in the field of their own lives, invisible to the world around them, being prepared for more than they see. Now I need to present to you the second story, and it will reach you from an angle you are probably not expecting. In the book of Genesis, Leah was the eldest daughter of Laban. She married Jacob by her father's arrangement, not by choice, not by reciprocal love. The biblical text is brutally honest about this. Jacob loved Rachel, Leah's younger sister, and this fact was known. It was the context that defined Leah's position within her own marriage, within her own house, within the family structure that should have been her home. The text says that Leah was hated, and in Hebrew the word used is sein, which means love to a lesser degree, passed over, systematically placed in second place. Leah woke up every day in a house where the hierarchy of affection was visible, where her position of inferiority was not a paranoid perception, it was the objective and daily reality of her relational existence. But the text says something that changes everything. When the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, He opened her womb. When the Lord saw, not when Jacob noticed, not when the family recognized the injustice, when the Lord saw. God was looking at Leah when everyone else was looking at Rachel, and the divine response to what He saw was not to make Jacob change his feelings. It was to act directly upon Leah's life, above, beyond, independent of what the human beings around her felt or failed to feel. And when Leah had her first son, she gave him a name that is one of the most honest and moving declarations in the entire Bible. She called the son Reuben and said, "Because the Lord has looked upon my affliction, now my husband will love me," still seeking validation from the one who did not see her. With the second son named Simeon, "Because the Lord has heard that I am unloved." With the third, Levi, "Now this time my husband will be joined to me." 3 sons, 3 names that reveal a woman still looking in the wrong direction to measure her value. And then comes the 4th son, and something happens that most people do not stop to observe. The text says that Leah conceived again and bore a son and said, "Now I will praise the Lord." Therefore she called his name Judah. Now I will praise the Lord. Not now my husband will love me. Not now I will be recognized. This time, for the first time, Leah looked up instead of looking to the side, and the son born of this turn was Judah. Judah, the tribe from which King David descends, the lineage from which Jesus Himself descends, the word that became the name of the monotheistic faith that shaped Western civilization, Judaism, from Yehuda, from Judah. The most transformative son Leah generated was not born from the years she was looking at Jacob waiting to be seen. He was born at the exact moment she stopped seeking validation from the one who did not see her and turned her gaze to the only one who had always seen. What Leah discovered at that moment has a name in Hebrew, and this is the second word that needs to enter your life today. The word is shamar, S-H-A-M-A-R. In Hebrew, shamar means to guard, watch, protect, preserve. It is the verb used in Psalm 121, which says, "The Lord is your keeper, shamar, the Lord is your shade at your right hand." But what makes shamar especially powerful is the context in which it appears in the psalm. The psalmist is looking to the hills, asking where his help will come from, and then declares, "Help comes from the Lord, and the Lord is not a keeper who slumbers. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. The God who shamars you is the God who did not look away even in the moments when everyone else looked away. When you were at a holiday table and felt you were invisible, he saw. When you needed it and the call was not answered, he was present. When the achievement you shared was met with quick silence and a change of subject, he was recording it. This is not a comforting metaphor. It is a spiritual reality with enormous practical implications. Because God's Shamar does not operate only as a witness, it operates as an active guardian who uses what was done against you as construction material for what is being built in you. The Cognitive Neuroscience Research Center at UniFSP published studies on what they call the somatic memory of rejection, the record the nervous system makes of social exclusion experiences, which produces neurological patterns similar to those recorded in physical pain. Rejection of family origin specifically activates the same brain regions that respond to physical damage. This is not emotional weakness, it is biology. It is your body honoring the reality of what was done. But the same research documents something crucial. People who manage to reframe the experience of rejection within a larger narrative of purpose, who find a context in which the pain has a function, demonstrate not only more robust emotional recovery, but the development of leadership skills, empathy, and relational discernment that do not develop through any other path. The shamar you lived, the protection that kept you whole despite what tried to fragment you, produced in you something that no easy environment would be capable of building. There is a third dimension of rejection that needs to be addressed here, because it is the one that most silences people, and the one that most needs light. It is the question of what to do with the current silence, with the people who hurt you and who have now either fallen silent or maintain a calculated distance or remain present but superficially, as if nothing had happened, as if the weight you carried did not exist. You want them to recognize it. You want them to name what they did. You want there to be a real conversation, an honest apology, a repair of the fabric that was torn, and this desire is completely legitimate. It is not weakness. It is the instinct for justice that God placed in every human being. But there is a truth that needs to be said with love and with firmness. Your restoration cannot have their recognition as a condition. Joseph, and I need to get to him now because the arc of his life is the most complete on this theme in the entire Bible, spent 13 years in slavery and in prison because of his brothers. 13 years. And when he finally reached the palace, when he became the second most powerful man in Egypt, when his brothers appeared before him needing help, he could have demanded full recognition before any action. He could have collected the debt with interest. He could have made them hostages of the reparation they owed him. Instead, he weeps, not from pain, from recognition, because he had reached the point where he could see the whole story from above, from God's angle. And then he says the phrase that is perhaps the most powerful in the entire biblical narrative on rejection. You planned evil against me, but God planned it for good. You planned evil. Joseph did not relativize. He did not say it wasn't that bad. He did not protect his brothers from an honest naming of what they had done. It was evil. The betrayal was real. The injustice was real. The suffering was real. But God planned it for good, not despite the evil they did, through it. Using the raw material of the most brutal rejection a human being can live, being sold by one's own blood brothers to build the authority, character, and positioning that would allow Joseph to save entire nations, including the traitors themselves. This is not a call for you to pretend it did not hurt. It is a call for you to understand that God is sovereign enough to use what was done against you as construction material for what no human good intention could have built. The third Hebrew word you need today is shub, S-H-U-B. Shub means to return, restore, bring back to an original or superior state. It is the word of divine restoration, not the patch that tries to reconstruct what was, but the renewal that brings something of superior quality to what existed before the rupture. Joel 2:25 uses shub in the most direct promise of restoration that exists in the biblical text. I will restore to you the years that the swarming locust has eaten. God did not say, I will comfort you for the years that were eaten. He said, I will restore shub. Bring back with compound interest what was taken, not what you would have had if the rejection had not happened, but something that is only possible because the rejection happened and you crossed through it without letting go of God's hand. Researchers at PUCSP who study leadership development in Brazilian adults consistently documented a specific profile of high-effectiveness leadership, people whose ability to perceive complex relational dynamics, to create environments of genuine belonging, and to exercise authority without needing constant validation, is directly associated with social exclusion experiences processed with meaning. In simple language, those who were excluded and survived the exclusion without hardening their hearts develop a capacity to create belonging for others that those who were never excluded simply do not have access to. What they did against you is being shub. Restored, transformed, returned with a yield they never predicted when they made the decisions they made. Write KVOD in the comments, in capital letters, KVOD. This is your declaration that the weight of your identity is not in the evaluation of those who did not see you. It is in the structure God placed in you before any human being had the opportunity to opine on who you are. KVOD. Write it now. I want to talk about what changes in your practical life when you internalize what this video is revealing. Because spirituality without practical grounding does not serve your real life. The first thing that changes is your relationship with the need for explanation. One of the biggest traps for those rejected by family is the compulsion to explain themselves, to build increasingly elaborate arguments that prove the rejection was unfair. You spend hours replaying conversations in your head, refining what you should have said, preparing the perfect response for a discussion that may never happen. This is not a process. It is a way of keeping your identity anchored in the approval of those who never approved of you. David did not summon his brothers for a conversation about what they had done by not including him. He went back to the field. He exercised what he had been anointed to exercise. And the field, not the brothers, was the place where the king was built. The second thing that changes is your capacity to create belonging for others. Research by the Datafolha Institute on Community Dynamics in Brazil identified that the environments of greatest welcome and genuine belonging, both in religious and secular contexts, are invariably led by people who carry a history of exclusion. Because those who were excluded know the weight of banishment. They know what the closed table does to a person. And therefore, they create open tables with an urgency and an authenticity that those who always belong simply do not have the same motivation to create. The wound they created in you has become the most precise instrument you have to heal the same wound in others. This is not motivational poetry. It is a functional reality that you are probably already exercising, and that will continue to grow as you stop wasting energy trying to recover what they did not give you, and start investing that energy in what you already have to give. The third thing that changes is your relationship with approval in general. When you anchor your kavod, the weight of your identity, in God instead of in human evaluations, something changes in your posture, not in an arrogant way, in a silent way, a firmness that people around you perceive even without being able to name it. Approval becomes welcome, but not necessary. Recognition becomes pleasant, but not constitutive. You begin to operate from an internal fullness that does not fluctuate according to the thermometer of what others are feeling about you at that moment. The HeartMath Institute calls this psychophysiological independence, the condition in which a person's nervous system is not in a state of regulation dependent on the approval of the external environment. It is measurable in heart rate variability patterns, and what research shows is that people in this state have access to cognitive, creative, and relational capacities that are blocked when the nervous system is in approval-seeking mode. In spiritual language, when you stop needing them to see you, you begin to see with a clarity that was not possible before. Activate the notification bell now, because next week I will reveal what the Bible calls the stone the builders rejected, and why the human builder's criterion for rejection is, with a consistency that will surprise you, the same criterion God uses for selection. This episode is the direct continuation of what we are building today, and you will need to have watched this one for the next one to make complete sense. Let me give you an image that will stay with you. Think of an oak tree, not the adult oak with the wide canopy and the roots you see on the surface of the earth. Think of the acorn, the tiny brown seed that fits entirely in the palm of your hand. There is nothing in the appearance of the acorn that reveals what it carries inside. No external sign, no visible indicator that it will become one of the most robust living structures in nature, with roots that can reach 16 meters deep and branches that offer shade for centuries. The acorn does not need any human expert to validate what it is. The information of the oak is in the code of its structure, independent of any external evaluation, and the growth process does not happen despite difficult conditions. The most resistant oak is the one that grew in soil with the most resistance, because the resistance forced the roots to go deeper to find water. Trees raised in ideal greenhouse conditions, without resistance, with all the necessary support, have shallower roots and are the first to fall when the storm comes. You grew up with resistance, with difficult soil, with conditions that a human agronomist would say were inadequate for what you were planted to be, and because of that, not despite that, your roots went deeper than most can go, deeper than the people who grew up in easy soil, with constant approval, without the need to seek water in layers that only difficulty reveals. This was not punishment, it was radical formation, and the tree that emerged from the process, that is emerging, that is here now, that watched this video with the questions it brought, is exactly the structure that the purpose awaiting you will need to sustain. Before closing, one last thing that needs to be said clearly. Internalizing the kavod and shamar of God, understanding that your value does not depend on the evaluation of those who rejected you, is not the same as closing the possibility of relational restoration. It is not closing the door. It is not hardening the heart to what may still change. It is simply stopping making relational restoration a condition for your peace, stopping holding your flourishing hostage to the recognition that may or may not arrive, stopping wasting the energy that should go to purpose by feeding an internal court that is judging a cause that is not yours to judge. What they are going to do with what they did, how they will process it, if they will recognize it, if they will change, is God's territory, not yours. Your territory is the field. It is the place where, even though you were not called to the room, you exercise the anointing with the same care and the same integrity that you would exercise if everyone were watching. Because what God saw in David in the field was exactly that. A man who cared for sheep that were not his with the same dedication a king would have for his own people. Not performatively, because no one was watching. Authentically, because it was who David was, independent of an audience. And it is this David, the one from the field, the one no one called to the room, the Katan the father left out, that God chose. Not despite what Jesse thought, beyond what Jesse thought. What the people who rejected you think about you is not the ceiling of what you can be. It is only evidence of how much they do not see. And the higher your destiny, the more common it is that those who were closest were the last to recognize it. Your place will not be occupied by those who approved of you. It will be occupied by who you are. Write kavod in the comments now, in capital letters, because it is not just a word, it is the declaration that the weight of your identity is anchored in God and not in the evaluation of those who did not see you. That the shamar that kept you in the most difficult moments is still active. That the shub God promised is already happening, returning with compound interest what was taken. Kavod. And if you know someone who is carrying the pain of family rejection in silence, someone who wonders what is wrong with them, who internalized the evaluation of those who were not in a position to evaluate them, share this video now. Because sometimes the right message arrives by the hand of someone who cares enough to send it. Next week, the stone the builders rejected. Why the human criterion for exclusion and the divine criterion for selection are, with a frequency that will surprise you, the same thing. Activate the bell. Do not miss this content. Until next time, and remember, the oak was already in the acorn, the king was already in the field, and what you are was already in you long before any human evaluation had the opportunity to be